Hello everyone, welcome to a new video lecture. This video lecture is about barriers to communication. My name is Tane and let's start the class. Barriers to communication. So what are barriers? So barriers are any obstacles or difficulties that come in the way of communication. They may be physical, mechanical, psychological, cultural, or linguistic in nature. All right. So when we are communicating and there is something that disturbs us, okay, what has been disturbing us is the barrier, the obstacle, the hurdle that we come across while communicating is barrier. Okay, there are so many examples. For example, I am talking to a friend of mine and there is a person who comes and asks me time or direction to a particular place or address of a particular place, and this person comes again and again and again, and this person will become barrier because I am talking to my friend. I am in a completely different zone. So that is barrier. So barriers to communication. Barriers are called noise in the jargon of communication. In communication terminology, noise is the word by which we point towards barriers or by which we describe barriers. So barriers are called noise in communication studies or in communication terminology. I think I have made both these points clear. Let us move to the next slide. There are 4 types of barriers. Now, if you search on internet, you may find other types of barriers as well, but those will be just like, for example, we look for tense and then there is a present continuous tense and present progressive tense. Both are same. So there could be different names, but more or less barriers are of 4 types only. So these 4 types, we will go through these 4 types one by one. Okay. So the first type is physical barrier or physical barriers. The second is psychological barriers. Third would be linguistic and cultural barriers. And fourth is mechanical barriers. All right. Good. Physical barrier. So physical barrier contains 4 different types of barriers. So first is competing stimulus in form of another conversation going on within hearing distance or loud music or traffic noise in the background. The cawing of crows or a plane passing overhead can, for example, drown out messages altogether. As I already have given an example which was similar to this one. So you are talking to someone and there is noise in the background. Not noise, barrier noise, actually noise. Something that you don't like, an unpleasant sound. Okay? So that is in the background. Now that the presence of that noise has this, potentiality to disturb you, to, stop you, to create hurdles. So that will be a barrier. Competing stimulus, environmental stress, a high temperature and humidity, poor ventilation, vibrations felt, a strong glare, all can contribute to distortions in the sending and receiving of messages. Well, this type of barrier contains, for example, you are sitting in an office and all of a sudden the electricity stops flowing and all the electrical appliances immediately shut down and the air condition or the cooler, whatever, the fan you're enjoying stops working. Well, that type of situation will present itself as a barrier. So that would be environmental stress. Your environment will become a barrier. The environment may itself become a barrier or the environment may present different barriers before you and you may come across barriers, and the barriers are already mentioned over here: high temperature, humidity, poor ventilation, right? Okay, good. Subjective stress, sleeplessness, ill health, effects of drugs and mood variations give rise to forms of subjective stress that often lead to great difficulties in listening and interpretation. Do you remember the time when you refused to talk to someone because you were not feeling good? Okay, sometimes it happens to us. We simply refuse to talk to someone because we don't feel good. Okay, because probably we did not get good sleep at night, or probably our health is not good, or probably we are drunk or something. So even that situation presents different types of barriers. Okay. Fourth is ignorance of medium. So the various media for communication are oral, written, audio, visual, and audiovisual. The use of a medium with which the communicators are not familiar would turn the medium itself into a barrier. Okay. Say, for example, you are using a mobile phone, but then the person to whom you are communicating doesn't know how to use a mobile phone. Then mobile phone itself will become a barrier. Okay, we have noticed that our grandmother or probably our grandfather, they did not have mobile phones back in their time. So if you give them a mobile phone and tell them to use it, they won't be able to use it. Well, that can become a barrier to them. So these all are physical barriers. Okay, let's move ahead. Psychological barriers. Let's understand what are psychological barriers and what types of barriers are called as psychological barriers. So first is frame of reference or worldview. Here we have to pay attention. Physical barriers, understanding physical barriers is not a difficult task, but understanding psychological barriers is actually difficult. It requires attention. So be attentive. First is frame of reference or worldview. A frame of reference is a system of standards and values, usually implicit, underlying, and to some extent controlling an action or expression of any belief, attitude, or idea. No two individuals possess exactly similar frames of reference, even if they should be identical twin. Right? Frame of reference is something according to which we judge situation, person, institutions, outcomes, reaction, a lot of things. When we see something and immediately the image that gets formed inside of our respective minds, that image gets formed because of frame of reference or worldview, how we perceive things. Okay, our interpretations, our inferences, all are guided or affected by this frame of reference. There is self-image. Second, it is the self-image that makes us defend our point of view, interpret messages in the way we wish to interpret them, and see reality according to our own preconceived notions. We retain only that information that is pleasant to us or reinforces our ego, and very conveniently forget the details that are unpleasant or humiliating. Self-image. What do we think about ourselves is self-image. The perception that we have about ourselves is self-image. So for example, you think you are a very bad person, right? So you might be having valid reasons for why you think you are a bad person. And so someone may think that he's a good person, and that person too might be having reasons for this particular belief. So self-image is exactly that. And self-image is something that makes us defend our point of view, our perspective. If we see something from a unique perspective and we express our observations before people, and people, if they disagree, then we try to rationalize things. Why? Because if people disagree with our observations or disagree with what we think we know, then our self-image, gets injured, and we cannot tolerate it. We cannot see our self-image getting injured. That's why we always try to justify ourselves. Okay, reality might be something else, but we will see reality. I don't know how to explain this thing, but let's understand it. If there is something we will infer or interpret or, perceive it only in the way that our self-image allows us to. Right? Okay, good. We retain only that information that is pleasant to us or reinforces our ego, and very conveniently forget details that are unpleasant or humiliating. So, for example, we read something, okay, and we found that so and so paragraphs or so and so chapters are very, disturbing or thought provoking, or they challenge our self image. So, in that case, we will try to forget those. We will try to simply go past the chapter without giving it due respect and importance. And if there is a situation wherein we have acted in a very unpleasant manner or very humiliating manner, we will try to forget that as well. So that is self-image. And this self-image too is a barrier. Then there is resistance to change. The risk of being changed is one of the most frightening prospects many of us can face, says Carl Rogers. No wonder we resist change in any form with all our might, except where we are convinced it is to our own benefit. Resistance to change, understand this. We think, or think is not the right word, we believe that something is true. Now then comes a point in time when someone comes and tells us that, listen, whatever you have been believing in is not true. It's a complete lie. Your whole childhood has been a lie. Your whole, teenage has been a lie. And then he presents evidences. Well, that is the point when we resist. Exactly. We do not accept what the other person says. Why? Because we believe that whatever we know is actually true. That is resistance to change. If you believe in something and someone asks you to change your, belief or to believe in something else, we resist because this resistance to change barrier gets activated. Okay, we accept something only when we are convinced that if we listen to this person or if we believe in this thing or if we follow this path, we are going to get benefits. Okay, good. Fourth is defensiveness and fear. One man's most compelling need is to justify himself. I have already explained it. We always try to rationalize things. We always try to give a rationale for our actions. We always try to, tell people that whatever we have done is the right thing to do. We're not wrong. We're always right. We always want to end up on the right side, on the winner's side. Okay, one man's most compelling needs is to justify himself, I think. Needs? I don't know. Okay. Even when we are convinced we are wrong, few of us admit it as it means a loss of face, right? More often than not, we tend to rationalize the mistakes we make, the attitudes and opinions we hold so dear. Fear is the most constricting of all effects, resulting often in tunnel vision. It also gives rise to slow and narrow thinking. Now, then there is fear. So if we are afraid, we won't be able to communicate. I'll give you an example. You have to appear in an interview and you are afraid. You may not be able to perform good in the interview. You have to take an examination. You are afraid. You might be knowing a great deal about the questions that might be asked in the examination, but just because you are afraid, and because you are afraid, you may not be able to perform good. That fear might affect your communication. So all these communications, all these barriers are part of psychological barriers. Linguistic and cultural barriers. Okay. I could have given, some information pertaining to this particular barrier, but it is better if I understand it to you all. Okay, wait a second. Linguistic barriers and cultural barriers. Cultural shock, we all know. So, for example, you are from northern part of India and you have to go to the southern part of India. You won't be able to communicate with people over there. Why? Because of cultural shock. because your language is different, because you do not know their language, you do not know their dialects, you do not know how they function. A word that means something in your language might be meaning something else in their language. And you're always afraid that you might be misinterpreted, you might be misunderstood. And that too is a fear. So that is cultural and linguistic barrier. It is not too complex. Now then there is mechanical barrier. Mechanical barriers are those raised by the channels employed for interpersonal, group, mass, or interactive communication. A landline telephone that is in poor working order, meeting demands on the yelling ability of sender and receiver is a mechanical barrier. A slow cable or digital broadband connection is a mechanical barrier to our access to internet and group communication. A whistling microphone and the wrong placement of loudspeakers are barriers which are mechanical in nature. I don't think I need to explain anything in this paragraph. Still, we are using an instrument to communicate, and if that instrument is not working properly, then instrument itself can become a barrier. Okay, that is it. We have discussed all the barriers, and I think I have made things clear. Thank you very much.